Look at these two numbers. On the left is India's entire defense budget, $74 billion. On the right is what the country spends just to import crude oil, $137 billion. This means whenever conflict in the Middle East causes a price spike, the impact is felt immediately. The Indian rupee weakens, and inflation hits every household at the fuel pump. The density of nuclear fuel offers a potential solution. A single 10-gram pellet of uranium contains as much energy as 120 gallons of crude oil. But there is a geographic obstacle. India possesses almost no domestic uranium to fuel its reactors. Without a domestic fuel source, the nation's economic growth is tied to the stability and the prices of foreign suppliers. In 1974, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi authorized India's first nuclear tests. The global reaction was immediate and punitive. For the next 30 years, the nuclear suppliers group blocked India from the global market. The country was cut off from the technology and the enriched uranium required to run a conventional nuclear grid. However, decades earlier, a physicist named Homi Bhabha had already identified a local alternative. He pointed toward India's own coastline. These dark sands contain 25% of the world's thorium reserves, enough to power the country for 4 centuries. This international isolation forced India to solve an immense engineering challenge: how to power 1 billion people using only the resources found on its own beaches. The problem with thorium is that it cannot sustain a nuclear reaction on its own. It needs to be refined using uranium, the very material India was prohibited from buying. Indian scientists bypassed this constraint by building a specific type of reactor that uses heavy water instead of regular water. Heavy water acts as a moderator. It slows down fast-moving neutrons so they can strike other atoms effectively. But unlike regular water, it does so without absorbing them. This efficiency allowed India to generate power using natural, unenriched uranium mined domestically, removing the need for foreign fuel. As these reactors ran, the spare neutrons were busy. They were being absorbed by the surrounding uranium and transmuted into plutonium. Stage 1 provided electricity while acting as a large-scale manufacturing plant, stockpiling the plutonium required for the next phase of the plan. In April 2026, at this facility in Kalpakkam, India reached the next milestone, bringing a prototype fast breeder reactor online. Inside this core, there is no heavy water to slow anything down. Neutrons move at 20,000 kilometers per second, colliding with the fuel with immense force. While the core burns plutonium for electricity, surplus neutrons fly outward and strike an outer blanket made of depleted uranium. This bombardment creates fresh plutonium in the outer shell. The machine actually produces more fuel than it consumes. India has successfully engineered a reactor that generates its own future fuel supply. Now that the breeder technology is operational, the depleted uranium blankets will be replaced with blankets of thorium. When fast neutrons strike the thorium, they trigger a transformation that turns the beach sand mineral into uranium-233. This is the goal of the 70-year plan. Uranium-233 is a potent, efficient fuel that can sustain India's energy needs for centuries. This final stage allows the country to use its own thorium reserves to run its grid, ending its reliance on the global oil market. To understand the difficulty of this achievement, consider that other nations spent $50 billion trying to master breeder technology and eventually abandoned it. India achieved it for $1 billion. When this plan was first proposed, India was a nation still struggling to build its basic infrastructure. The long-term embargo intended to limit India's progress had an unintended effect. It necessitated the innovation required to use the resources they had at home. By learning to convert 850,000 tons of coastal sand into a reliable energy source, India has altered the global balance of power.